medieval thought, Thomas Aquinas, Duns Scotus, and so forth. And so God is not only the efficient cause, but also good. And you don't see Hobbes talking philosophically about the goodness of God. You do see Descartes talking about the goodness of God. And the reason I'll mention just in a moment. But let me pause there and see if this rundown on Hobbes refreshes your mind. Is it clear? Do you want clarification, rerun on anything there? Yes, Kristen.
One thing I didn't really understand, what exactly is the reconstitutive method?
Okay. As the scientist gathers observational data, a mass of information, not necessarily coordinated, interpreted in terms of theory and implication, a mass of information becomes available. Now, how is that going to be organized? You see. In effect, what is happening is that the scientist's observations, experiments, analysis are taking apart the world of our ordinary experience, such as the tree with an apple falling which is going to hit Isaac Newton on the head. You see, analyzing all of that. Now, what you want, however, is a systematic theoretical understanding. So, having, as it were, taken it apart into all the particular observations, now you try to reconstitute the understanding. And you reconstitute it in terms of premises, followed by logical deductions, leading you to further conclusions. Essentially arranging all of one's observations as premises or further inferences to show the logical interrelatedness. Okay, and then drawing further deductions. The reconstitutive method. When we get into the 19th century, there will be a subtle change in that, though it'll still persist. Because in the 19th century, what develops becomes known as the hypothetico-deductive method. That is to say, the premises for the deductive reconstitution. The premises are hypotheses, whereas for Hobbes, the premises are empirical generalizations. Do you see that difference? So that in a way, you have three ways of formulating a body of theoretical understanding in the sciences. Either empirical premises, then deductive inference, or intuitive premises, like mathematical axioms, then deductive inference, or, beginning in the 19th century, a hypothesis. And what you deduce from the hypotheses are the things you found empirically. You show that they all stem from some, what is called covering general law, a broad empirical generalization, of which your empirical findings are just particular instances. Okay, so we'll get into that when we get to John Stuart Mill next semester.
So
David.
Does Hobbes, not Hobbes, but Bacon, does Bacon stop after he makes the generalization? Or
Yes. Yes, Bacon doesn't seem to be cued into the deductive method. You find in almost any commentary or any historical work that talks about Bacon, his need to get into mathematical methods, that's one of his lacks. The use of hypothesis is one of the differences between Bacon's methods and later inductive methods, you see. Now, the use of hypothesis comes into focus, as I was telling Kristen, in the 19th century. But mathematical methods, no, in one way that's already operative in Descartes. Yeah. Okay. Anything else then about Hobbes? Then let me add a further comment about number 9 concerning God. We've talked about the breakdown of the medieval science rooted as it was in Greek science, Pythagorean, Platonic, or Aristotelian, as the case may be. And the breakdown of that science due to, in significant measure, the rise of nominalism, the development of purely empirical methods, since there are no forms that you have to get at by other than empirical means. Now, it's been argued that there were other reasons for the movement to empirical methods than simply the rise of nominalism. Other reasons. So that a British philosopher by the name of Michael Foster, M.B. Foster, in a series of articles in the 1930s, a long time ago now, in the journal Mind, a very famous series of articles, developed this thesis, that the rise of empirical science is due to the fact that by the late Middle Ages it was recognized that if we take seriously the doctrine of creation, it follows that the nature of the physical creation is completely contingent. It doesn't have to be, and doesn't have to be the way it is. That is to say, that if there is no necessary creation, if there are no fixed forms necessitating things, then what you have is the contingency of created things, as indeed William of Ockham had said. But if then you want to understand the way things are in nature, what you have to do is simply look and see. Empirical methods. However, what is going to assure us that the processes of nature will be accessible, intelligible, that our empirical methods are going to be reliable? And there again you have some sort of theological justification that's been suggested. Alfred North Whitehead, whom we'll be reading towards in the last third of the second semester. Alfred North Whitehead, 20th century mathematician, physicist, philosopher. He argues in one place that it was confidence in the rationality of God that gave confidence in the intelligibility of God's creation. You see, quite apart from the theory of forms, which had been the way in which God presumably gave intelligible order to the creation. But quite apart from that, granted a rational God, intelligibility of the creation. But the question still arises, not as to objective conditions, therefore, which make nature intelligible, but as to the subjective conditions which make human rationality reliable, and which make the human senses believable. You see. Now, the one who tried to argue for the reliability of human reason and senses is Descartes. Now, if your introduction to Descartes in your introductory course was in terms of his skepticism, yes, it's still the same Descartes. He starts methodologically where the skeptic is. Skeptical about reason, skeptical about the senses. But you'll find that by the time he gets to meditation 4, he is arguing that reason is trustworthy because a good God would not deceive us by giving us faulty intellectual faculties. So it rests on the goodness of God. And when finally in meditation 6, at the end of his meditations, he gets around to talking of sense experience, there again he pulls out the same kind of argument, that in the final analysis, our senses are reliable if we use them aright, because a good God would not deceive us by giving us unreliable senses. So the point is that Descartes is able to go beyond simply saying God is efficient cause. He's able to go beyond because of the goodness of God and talk about the reliability of human reason and the senses, and accordingly he's much more optimistic about the development of science and philosophy than the skeptics could ever have been, and certainly more confident about rational possibilities than Thomas Hobbes was. Comment? Question? Because there's been quite a lot of debate, discussion, about the influence of medieval thought in laying the basis for the rise of modern science. That sort of thing is discussed in the history of science at some length. There's one of our graduates who teaches in history of science up at University of Wisconsin in Madison, David Lindbergh. And Lindbergh is wary of these easy justifications. He makes the point that in the actual texts out of the medievals, he doesn't find that sort of confidence expressed. No, but the ethos is there, is part of the response. And the other thing is that it's the ethos of confidence in a divinely created world that underlies both the theory of forms, okay, and the continued confidence that people like Occam and Bacon had in the empirical accessibility of nature to human understanding. So as long as you say it guardedly, it seems to me there's good basis there. David?
So it's being argued that the very thing that, like they say that scientific revolution led to sort of science is God, that kind of mentality. They were saying that Descartes could argue, well, you could argue from this passage in Descartes that this science is God mentality actually came about from confidence in God.
Descartes' thesis is not a historical thesis. He's not saying confidence in science arose because of.